Hello everyone, this is part 6 of What If Naruto Was the Perfect Shinobi, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Naruto, thank goodness you're not. The blonde genin molded his expression back into a neutral stare as he turned towards the purple-haired serpent woman. His anger subsided somewhat as he took in her appearance. Anko seemed to have been run through the ringer in her own right. She looked a bit haggard and mentally drained, though she bore no obvious wounds. Naruto hasn't sensed any other battles going on in the area, but had been so preoccupied with not getting hacked into pieces by Zabuza that he admittedly might not have noticed. He still wasn't going to let the matter go without dropping a cold remark or two, however. Such sentiments aren't needed, sensei. The A-rank Nukanen Momoki Zabuza has been neutralized. The Kunoichi sighed and rubbed her temples in response. I can see that. I would have come to help too, but some cloaked weirdo had me trapped in an illusion. Another voice butted into his and Anko's conversation, sticking his nose where it wasn't wanted. We sensed other chakra sources over here. Tell us what you saw, Uzumaki. The demon carrier's eyes narrowed in irritation as some bearded shinobi tried to interrogate him using a severe tone while his genin squadron stared at the carnage with increasingly pale complexions. Naruto mused that this was the one occasion he could recall on which he had seen anything more expressive than total boredom pasted onto Nara Shikamaru's visage, not that he ever paid the lackadaisical cloud gazer much mind. Likewise, Akamaiki Chuji appeared as though he had lost his constant appetite and Hyuga Hinata was close to outright swooning. The demon carrier thought it ridiculous that a little blood and gore would so disturb these would-be shinobi. Best to tell an abridged truth, he decided. Team 10's instructor didn't need to know about Naruto's discussion with the Akatsuki, though he might have come clean to Anko had she come alone. Naruto would share those sordid little details in a private audience with the Hokage and no one else. The man you described was here a minute ago. He also had a partner who was dressed about the same, except he was much taller and carried a Zanbatsu. The second one seemed to be acquainted with Zabuza somehow, and I gathered that the both were ranked among Kiri's 7 swordsmen. The tall cloaked man more or less dominated Zabuza, and I was able to take out Zabuza's hunter nin accomplice. Zabuza tried a sneak attack when the other cloaked shinobi appeared and smoked him with some high-powered Kaiten technique. The cloaked men both ran away when they sensed you all coming closer. I wasn't able to get a good enough look at either man, nor do I know what their business was here. The demon container's explanation seemed to be good enough. Anko let out a slow nod and exhaled. The other shinobi didn't quite appear to trust the report but declined to press the issue. Naruto wasn't on his genin team or under his command and the blonde thus wasn't much obliged to share anything with him at all. The bearded man closed his eyes and lit up a cigarette, taking a long nicotine drag as Anko spoke up. Anyway, we've now been attacked by not only Zabuza but also an unknown S-class shinobi. This is more than enough to claim a valid contract breach. We've done enough here. Gator's presence in this city is all but eradicated and we're going home. Unlike the last time his trainer has suggested this idea, Naruto was now in no mood to oppose the plan. Almost getting killed in combat had dented his ardor to a large degree. What he and Anko had already dealt with was equivalent to at least an A-rank mission and perhaps even higher. He wasn't inclined to S over some drug-peddling leeches. Falling at this moot point would be akin to abandoning his sworn duty to serve his cage. Still, the demon vessel did have one certain loose end that he wanted to tie down. I won't argue this time, but I'd like to make a quick trip to the Hidden Mist also. Gonna try and collect that big heavy price on Zabuza's head, I'm guessing. Naruto allowed a small smile onto his lips. She seemed to understand his thinking well. He was no longer angry with her. He was somewhat curious as to why Itachi would apparently attack her but not K her, not to mention the Uchiha's strategic retreat when a much weaker team appeared. The Akatsuki member could have dispatched them all without so much as breaking a sweat. The spiky blonde quite doubted that Uchiha Itachi cared a single whit about Anko or Team 10, knowing that the young man had exterminated his entire clan with no remorse whatsoever. That's right. I did have a hand in his death, even though I didn't deliver the last blow. Sorry, kiddo, but that's in the opposite direction. I need to report these events ASAP. Naruto averted his gaze downward and yanked loose the senbon needles that were still lodged in his arms and legs. He hissed in pain as he messed with his shredded tendon. The adrenaline that had sustained him during the battle had subsided and now nothing remained save the hurt. The blood-stained senbon landed in the standing water with a plopping sound as he tossed them aside. Maybe the kid could come with us. Water country's pretty close to the wave. Both sensei and pupil stared at the new speaker. Naruto hadn't even noticed the elderly man that seemed to be traveling with Team 10 until he decided to speak up and make his presence known. His dress and overall demeanor indicated that he was a working-class person and not at all the sort that one would expect to be able to hire shinobi escorts. This is Tazuna-san, a bridge builder in Wave Country. We've been ordered to escort him back home and protect him until his work is completed. The mission hasn't been so easy on us up to this point, though. Naruto paid minimal attention as Team 10's leader described their being attacked by a Rain Nin team likely hired by the same Gatu earlier on in their trip. Many shinobi residing within Omegakure were Nukanen or other wanted criminals. The spiky blonde doubted that there were any around there that could even begin to approach Zabuza's SK level or even Haku's. He already knew that Gator's actual headquarters was in the Wave Country. He owed the corrupt magnate a personal receipt over the Zabuza incident. Perhaps he would have his chance to deliver by tagging along with Team 10, though the actual decision wasn't his to make. We could use another hand in case things get messy, and you seem pretty tough. At least somebody acknowledges my talents. It's your call, Anko-sensei. The pineapple-haired woman remained silent a moment. Go with them, you could use a short break and it'll do you some good to visit another hidden village and see the sights. Stay with Asuma's team through their mission and obey his orders until you report back to Konoha. The demon carrier didn't much like being put under another team's command but didn't complain about the decision. More than likely he'd be able to avoid having to interact with them anyway. This Asuma character didn't seem to like Naruto all that much, not that such reactions were anything new to the blonde genin shinobi. Anko sprinted away without another word, moving quickly back to Konoha to make her report. Naruto didn't really want or need to hear her say goodbye or anything similar. At that point they were but two shinobi on separate missions, nothing more or less. Time to prepare my delivery, then. Those with weak stomachs ought to look away. Naruto trudged a short distance through the water to where Zabuza's shredded and molten corpse lay. Everything below the lower N area was liquid slop. Itachi's attack had connected in the back right above the waist. The stench was nothing less than nauseating. The demon carrier wrenched Zabuza's head up by its black hair and set it down on a steel crate located next to a warehouse door. Naruto took Kubikiri Haucho up in both hands, struggling with its weight as he raised the awkward cleaver and brought it down onto its original owner's T, severing everything below the chin with a clean chop. Zabuza's head was then wrapped in treated medical bandages that the blonde had kept in his trench coat and sealed inside a small wooden box. Naruto covered his bleeding leg with the remaining medicated gauze and shouldered his newly appropriated Zanbatsu once more. He made his way back over to the other shinobi and the bridge builder with the box containing the prepared head tucked under his arm. All done here. I'm prepared to head out whenever you all are, comrades. The demon vessel had hoped to rattle Asuma and his team with his intentional odd and mysterious smile and the chipper tone in his voice. Few could muster such an enthusiastic attitude whilst hacking apart AS body. Uzumaki Naruto was rather desensitized to such violence, having partaken in it even as a small child. The bearded shinobi Asuma shook his head in disgust as he took a drag on his second cigarette. The others hadn't even been watching his antics save the old civilian Tazuna, whose tanned and weathered skin was looking a little bit white as a result. Right, let's get moving. I'd like us to make it a good ways downriver by sunset. With that the odd quintet started towards the city limits along the Great Sakai River's banks. Their path would eventually lead to the Eastern Sea. Once there, they would travel along the peninsular coastline until reaching the still incomplete bridge linking the mainland to the insular Wave Country. Shikamaru scowled and muttered something about long irritating missions and troublesome interlopers under his breath as he stalked along. Naruto pretended not to hear the boy, not being all that concerned with such a useless shinobi. There was no weakness quite as detrimental to one's potential as sloth. The trip to Wave Country, as it turned out, took several days to complete. Naruto could have covered the distance on his own in 12 hours or so, but the Shinobi squad had to slow its pace to a mere brisk walk in order to accommodate Tazuna. The old man couldn't move at anything close to their optimum speed. This was such a poor country. People were starving on the streets. Naruto almost sympathized with the citizens, but didn't because he viewed the situation as being their own making. They had allowed Gato to dominate them. Wave's people showed no willingness to band together and revolt to drive away the dictatorial crime boss. The demon carrier said nothing about his thoughts, however, as he sat down at the meager dinner table at Tazuna's home. He had remained more or less silent throughout his little stint as an unsolicited addition to Asuma's team. Okay, dinner's served. Go ahead and dig in, everybody. Tazuna's daughter, a rather pretty woman named Tsunami, placed dinner on the table. The meal was anything but sumptuous, cheap soba noodles with some rather withered seasoned vegetables. Naruto had eaten much worse in his day, so he had no problem digesting the meager meal. Upon tasting it, he was impressed with the woman's ability to make a decent supper with such poor ingredients. The admiration wasn't quite universal, however. Chuji especially seemed less than pleased with the selection, and the Hinata's strange expression hinted that she wasn't much used to such cuisine either. The Akamaiki always kept his own culinary reserves in his pack, though, and the Hyuga heiress was much too shy and polite to ever even consider lodging a complaint. So, I suppose you're going to be headed out to Water Country early tomorrow. Naruto concealed his surprise at being addressed. Throughout the trip he had remained more or less inconspicuous. Team 10 and their client didn't disturb him and vice versa. He had caught Hinata sending him concerned glances now and again during their travels. That had been the sole real interaction that he had shared with Asuma and his genin team. The QB was still dormant while his host's demonic tenketsu healed and recharged. Even a chakra tank like Naruto needed time to recover when his reserves were depleted. The blonde had slept outdoors when they were camped using his leather coat as a blanket. Naruto glanced over at Tazuna and swallowed his noodles and then responded. I'm planning on leaving right around dawn, as soon as I have enough sunlight to see. Get out to the docks early enough and you can hire a boat to take you across the bay. There's no need. I can make it over there a lot quicker treading the water on my own. Naruto sensed somebody's gaze on his back again. He craned his head back to see Hinata looking at him again with that same odd stare. The gaze almost seemed to possess sadness and disappointment. The demon carrier seethed underneath his impassive mask. As though that living doormat had the right to pass sentence on him. Staring at him with those pearl eyes because he chose not to remain the smiling little imbecile onto whom she'd nursed her pathetic little crush once upon a time. Naruto had been wholly oblivious to the issue at the actual time, but the timid girl's quiet obsession had been obvious in retrospect, back during their earlier childhood when he still played silly pranks and screamed about becoming Hokage. And then the blonde had met with and accepted his inner demon and had seized control over his own destiny, had become something better than what he had been, and at some obscure point the little Hyuga had gotten over him and moved on. Or so Naruto had thought. But it didn't matter. He would never have returned her attraction in either case, the old Uzumaki or the current. The one version was too dense and stupid and the other was too preoccupied with more important matters. I'm going to bed now. I don't need to oversleep tomorrow morning. The spiky blonde pushed back and stood upright, leaving his partially eaten meal behind. With Akamaiki Chuji sitting at the table, there could be no doubt that the rest would make its way inside a human stomach. Stalking upstairs with a scowl, Naruto reached the guest room he was given to share with Shikamaru and Chuji. There were 2 sleeping bags on the ground in addition to a bed. Not caring to cause a minor controversy by stealing the only bed, he moved his Zanbatsu and the box containing Zabuza's head over to a sleeping bag and settled down. Sleep didn't take long to claim him into its embrace. Several more days later, a loaded Uzumaki Naruto stepped back onto solid ground in Wave Country. He had spent the meantime in the Hidden Mist purchasing brand new equipment as well as having his other gear serviced. He had woken up early and departed Tazuna's house at dawn days ago as promised and had run the distance across to Water Country on his own. The demon carrier arrived in the insular nation's capital port Sagiribara right in time to stop at a dockside stand and sit down to a nice hot morning meal. He then scanned the area and moved towards the strongest chakra concentration in the area, his senses leading him right into the hidden mist village. Kirigakure was about what he had expected it to be, rustic and poor when compared to the larger and more modernized Konoha. There were practically no civilians within the village, as opposed to Konoha, which was teeming with non-shinobi. Everybody in Hidden Mist was connected in some manner with the ninja, right down to the shopkeepers and restaurant owners. The land was swampy yet somehow cold, and the citizens lived in thatched cottages. They weren't so accommodating to Naruto right at the start, and the demon carrier quickly came to realize that Konohagakure wasn't well liked among the hidden villages. Apparently the blonde's home village used its wealthy status and more extensive shinobi ranks to push the smaller villages around, and those that resisted openly tended to come out crushed and humiliated, much like the Hidden Cloud a decade ago. But whatever enmity the Kiri populace might have had towards Naruto as an individual vanished when they saw that he had more than a little money to spend. The Mizukage had been away on business when Naruto arrived, and so he had to bring Momoki Zabuza's head to a lesser bureaucrat. The man had been surprised to see once a young claim the reward on the notorious criminal, but couldn't deny him the cash upon seeing the Mist Devil's trademark cleaver also in the spiky blonde's possession. The actual bounty had been less than what Naruto had hoped, but was still more than adequate to suit his purposes. The Konoha genin remained several days in the village, meeting new people and browsing the shops. Hidden Mist's weaponsmiths were renowned as being the best in all the 5 shinobi countries, and their armament stores were quite good as well, at least to those who possessed the assets to shop. He decided that he rather appreciated staying in a place where people didn't spit and swear at him on the streets and where he could walk into a store and shop without being denied service or cheated. What an odd week this has been. Naruto wasn't one to think out loud, but it seemed appropriate here. I don't think that odd even begins to describe it, brat. Naruto let out an almost serene smile. He didn't like not having his demonic companion around. The blonde leaned against a concrete support pole as he reached the bridge area. He could see Tazuna supervising the construction and ordering laborers about in the distance. Asuma and his genin were also there keeping watch at various positions. The demon container relaxed in the shade, having no intention to assist them with their work. So you're awake. I didn't even notice. It really has been an entire week, you know. The demon cracked his enormous N and yawned inside Naruto's mind. Feels like it, too. Remind me not to get carried away like that again, lest it chaos both. Like you'd pay any attention to me once that demon rage started churning anyway. But my bloodlust is always boiling, Kit. Surely you should understand that by now. Naruto then sensed a small chakra surge across the bridge. He was standing at the side that led into Wave Country, and the pulse had thus originated at the Fire Country mainland end. He glanced over and saw a shinobi team coming onto the bridge. Their clothing gave them away as being cloud nins even at such a distance. Almost immediately Team 10 moved in between the Kumo shinobi and Tazuna. The battle ought to be interesting given that the Hyuga heiress was present among the Konoha squad. The standing enmity between her clan and the Hidden Cloud village was legend. Maybe something bad would happen to her and another shinobi war would break out between Konoha and Kumo. The demon vessel wasn't outright wishing harm onto poor Hinata, but the consequences would be entertaining to watch were anything to happen nonetheless. A war would give Naruto ample opportunity to carve out his reputation. Let's see what Team 10 can really do. I'm certainly not getting involved. The Kyuubi's baritone chuckle indicated that the legendary demon was pleased with his host's callous attitude. I agree. Let them handle these swine on their own. Helping them isn't our concern. Naruto moved atop the support to gain a bird's eye view. Running up the side was tougher than he had anticipated due to the weight he carried. His trench combined with Zabuza's blade and several other new weapons to make put more than a little strain on his body. The blonde understood that he could store the Zanbatsu and other blades within scrolls and lighten his load to an enormous degree, but that idea didn't suit his personal style. He wondered whether or not Asuma and the others knew that he was around and not making any moves to come to their aid. They probably did, due to Hinata's Byakugan. Maybe he would intervene, should they somehow get into dire straits. The Cloud Nins didn't seem all that tough anyway, so it wasn't likely to become a serious issue. The battle between Team 10 and who were apparently the most recent among Gator's contracted shinobi began with the Cloud leader rushing at Asuma while a subordinate started making hand seals. The bearded shinobi's dual trench knives extended outward in response as the chain smoker engaged his principal opponent. A cloud kunoichi likewise attacked Hinata while the last remaining opponent matched up against both Shikamaru and Chuji at the same time. Asuma backed up the leader with ease but had to abandon the advantage and dodge when the second opponent unleashed a lightning-release thunderbolt that struck the bridge and made a small crater in the asphalt. Naruto snickered under his breath. He could have done so much better than that. Boring, these guys are even sorrier than those two Bakayaro Anko-sensei and I beat. Their leader doesn't look to be entirely hopeless, though. Mostly hopeless, yes. Right, because you're such an expert on human shinobi, Barker Fox. The demon was less than amused with his living subordinate's cheek. I've ked them by the thousands over the centuries, so yes. Watch your mouth, brat. The Cloud Nin leader landed a crescent kick to Asuma's cheekbone that staggered the man a second. His second was already down, espered in the gut by Asuma's trench knives. The bearded shinobi grazed the other's shoulder with his right knuckle blade in response and then stunned him using some ridiculous jutsu that involved blowing a cigarette smoke cloud at him. Meanwhile, Shikamaru and Chuji were doing rather well against their lone opponent. The Akamaiki was bleeding and appeared to have a broken nose. That little battle ended when the Nara used his trademark Kajime no Jutsu to bind the Cloud Shinobi in place and his overweight companion dashed the adversary into the concrete barrier with a slow but immensely strong double palm thrust. Naruto was almost loath to admit it, but the two made a good team. The two nodded and went over to assist Hinata. The Hyuga had done well enough on her own, having scored several hits on her opponent's sensitive chakra points during the duel. The Cloud Kuniki collapsed under the combined assault within seconds. Tazuna-san, the village is under attack. Gator's men have your daughter and grandson. Naruto looked downward at the wave villager running in Tazuna's direction in a screaming panic. Asuma had knocked down the last Cloud Shinobi while the blonde had been observing the other three genin. Team 10's squad leader bit out an irritated curse. I'll handle this. Team, you stay here and keep watch over the bridge builder. Asuma used the Konoha Shunshin and disappeared in swirling leaves. Naruto leapt down into the water underneath the bridge and tread across to the other side, emerging at the mainland base opposite shore aside the entrance to Tazuna's masterpiece. There was no point in keeping his little perch when there was nothing more to see. The demon container moved back onto the bridge at a deliberate pace and leaned against another support pole. He didn't get to relax long. The Cloud Nin leader that Asuma had taken out moments ago had been playing possum and rose again once he was gone. I've had enough. Time to old man. Shikamaru spat out some blood and dropped into an untrained combat stance alongside his teammates. TCH, no way we'll let you K the bridge builder. Screwing up a big mission like this'd be way too troublesome. My mom would skin me alive and Ino would never let me live it down either. That's right. We shall protect Tazuna-san with our lives. Naruto groaned inwardly. These three green genin weren't going to be able to handle a high-level chunin, as this one would have to be in order to be a mission squad leader. Letting them do their thing was one matter, but he'd catch hell should Asuma's students get ked without him having made an attempt to assist them. The enemy shinobi easily incapacitated the Akamaiki and then moved in on the Nara. Shikamaru blocked a couple punches but the Kumo Chunin grabbed the lazy genius genin by his pineapple ponytail and knocked him out with a knee strike to the head. Naruto grabbed his new Zanbatu's hilt and prepared to play the unwilling hero right as the enemy shinobi withdrew a kunai and made to K the down Nara. The blonde never got to intervene. Hinata's Byakugan activated and a moment later the cloud leader went down clutching his arm, the kunai clattering on the concrete. Two more gentle fist strikes crippled both legs, and the Hyuga at last hesitated with her hand about to impact the man's chest. The attack would have caused the Kumo shinobi's heart to explode, but the blonde wouldn't have stopped in the same position. The girl's reaction speed had nonetheless been impressive, even though she hadn't completed the task. Maybe Hinata was a short sight less weak than the demon vessel had so long believed. Any scared opponent would have neutralized her prior to pushing the attack on Shikamaru. That wasn't bad, Hyuga. Much better than I'd expected, seems like I wasn't needed. En Naruto-san, your clothes, and your H-Hitai 8. Naruto's appearance had indeed changed. He now wore a loose sleeveless crimson bodysuit tied at the waist with a black cloth sash, along with matching Kevlar B armor and braces and plated boots. Both lightweight and acceptably durable, these armaments were well suited to a warrior shinobi. Over those he still had his old weighted trench, and had kubakiri haucho strapped to the back. 3 kunai were strapped to his belt at the side opposite his katana, and he had a ninjato girded at each wrist. These were short sabing swords with elongated and hollowed hilts, inside which scrolls or poisons could be concealed, among other essentials. He mused that some might mistake him as a burgeoning weapons master, though he wasn't and had no real intention to be. Lastly, the cloth sack containing his remaining bounty ryo was also slung over a shoulder. The last change was to the blonde's high-tie 8. He no longer wore the Konoha standard issue that bore the village's emblem. Naruto had long considered it idiotic to see shinobi advertise their allegiances like such, and so he had a unique protector custom carved by an engraver in Kirigakure during his stay. His new model bore the symbol representing demon, and the symbol was painted in a deep crimson. The color matched the Kyuubi's eyes. Naruto rather hoped that the image would gall the annoying villagers back in Konoha once he returned to his personal prison. Could have helped out earlier, Naruto. We almost got ked over here. The demon container leered over at the groggy and now rising Nara Shikamaru with his pale blue eyes. Ridiculous, getting mad because Naruto hadn't made their mission easier. They'd never become anything without learning to rely on their own SKS. At least Hinata seemed to understand this, as she wasn't backing her teammate's statement. She seemed to be quite pleased, actually. Naruto supposed that beating a much higher-level shinobi was a positive experience, and maybe she was starting to think that she wasn't necessarily as helpless as she had always thought. Meh, but that would have been too troublesome, and it wasn't my obligation. Hey guys, look over there. There's more coming this way. Naruto had to admit to being a bit chagrined upon realizing that Akamaiki Chuji had somehow managed to detect an incoming threat that he hadn't. Not that these newest newcomers really much amounted to one. Approaching the bridge was a small army being led by a stumpy little man in sunglasses and a Western business suit. Surely this had to be none other than Gatu. The demon vessel grinned. What excellent timing. Now it's my turn, so sit back and watch the show. I've got business with this guy. So, you punks beat my hired shinobi. Good, that means now I don't have to pay, The greasy magnate walked with a swagger, looking quite smug as his thugs and goons brandished their blades and other assorted king instruments. Gator's mob had the entire passage back into Fire Country blockaded. Naruto strode towards the lot lacking a single care. The blonde could exceed their numbers 10 times over with one single hand seal by employing his cage bunshin technique. And you must be Gatu, the man in charge around these parts. Look here, men. This one wants to be the hero. Don't worry, it won't hurt too much. The demon carrier was already within striking distance. Gatu was a S-man walking. I.e., shinobi aren't made to be heroes. I'm here to ask whether or not you recognize this. The porcine crime lord seed his head and sneered as Naruto unclasped Zabuza's Zanbatsu. The demon carrier brought the blade around his body and holding the massive cleaver level with deliberate slowness. The blonde's smile deepened as Gatu paled ever so slightly and sweat began dribbling down his nose and cheeks. That, you ked Zabuza. And that means, wait, maybe we can make a deal. Naruto seed his head in amusement and nodded. There was no harm in toying with his meal a little. Gator's men began looking about one another warily and mumbling, the thugs not seeming much too willing to tangle with Momoki Zabuza's supposed cur. I'm listening. I might be willing to serve you provided the money's right. The magnate smiled broadly and clapped his hands in delight. Now that's what I like to hear, kid. Warms me to see a man with some business sense. The blonde didn't know whether to be enraged or smug at noting that Shikamaru and Chuji were both starting at him with absolute betrayal in their eyes. Hinata seemed even close to shedding tears. The game was too entertaining to abandon now. Naruto would be more serious were he engaged in a real mission, but this was a recreational S. Even the cold cur had to get his kicks somehow. We shinobi are tools and nothing more. My SKS are yours to command, Gatu Dono. Gatu steepled his porky digits and let out a dark chuckle. Excellent, K those 3 and the old geezer and you'll be a made man, mister. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, Yokogakure's legendary demonic 9-tailed serpent master Sannin. At your service. Naruto listened as the Kyuubi belly laughed at the ostentatious moniker. Shikamaru blinked and raised an eyebrow, now seeming to understand. The hidden fox village. The old demon ought to appreciate that, at least. Naruto only hoped that one snake-sanin Orochimaru would never hear about the blonde genin who dared to use a play on his TLE. But such a thing was almost impossible. The blonde cracked his N. Go ahead then, Serpent Master. Show me what you can do. Naruto closed his eyes, as his amused smile turned cold and vicious. Count on it, and my price will be your head, swine. Gato took an immediate step back, but to no avail. Naruto's eyes opened and widened. The blue orbs were alive with bloodlust and the gushing king intent was almost tangible. The crime boss and his hired minions halted in their places, rendered unable to move. The demon chose to add his intent into the mix as well, and not even a high-level shinobi was likely to be able to resist the terror. Naruto relished in the look on Gator's visage as his expensive sunglasses slid down and hit the concrete. The man's piggy little eyes were wide with unbridled horror. Gato, your tyranny comes to its end right here. The Shinigami beckons, and you cannot be late. Naruto whirled around and swung the Zanbatsu at Gator's end like one would a heavy baseball bat. A loud chop resounded in the air as the man's decapitated head soared into the air and plopped into the wavy bay waters aside the bridge. Blood sprayed like some terrible geyser, staining the headless man's expensive suit and the ground around it an impure crimson. Now on a roll, the Uzumaki knew at once what to do with the others. Now that our inept general is S, perhaps it's time to introduce his grunts to the sword also. No, boy, stop, it's enough. Gator's S and the rest won't stay without an employer. Watch closely, kids. This is what they don't teach you at the Genin Academy. Naruto wasn't listening to Tazuna. These useless SCS would serve his designs with the deaths, as so many others like them had in days gone by. The spiky blonde demon carrier reached into his coat with his unoccupied hand, the other still holding Kubikiri Haucho, and withdrew a scroll. A special scroll that required his blood as a libation. Naruto took his sweet time unrolling the snake summon contract and ran his thumb along the Zanbatsu's sharp blade. The ridiculously stylized nine-tailed serpent master dragged his bleeding digit down the contract. Concentrating his chakra and slamming his hand to the ground, he bellowed out 3 words that would each hold 24 men. They were powerless to even cry out, paralyzed by king intent. KuchiYose no Jutsu. The resulting smoke rolled across the water, blanketing the area in a thin haze. As summoned, the Serpent Lord appeared. Manda coiled around the bridge, straining but not quite crushing the engineered masterpiece. Tazuna and the Team 10 members all became rather impossible to discern due to the great snake's shadow. The serpent hissed in its unctuous drawl as he stared at the town across the bridge, sampling the exotic air with his tongue. Manda leered about in obvious disdain. Somebody has dared to interrupt Manda's nap. There will be consequences. My apologies, Great Serpent Lord. I am the one who called you here. Manda whirled about on the spot and whipped his head over to Naruto, hovering right above the demon carrier and staring at him with a giant serpentine eye. The blonde prayed that the snake boss wouldn't eat him now and ask questions later. Given the tannic horned serpent's current mood, such a thing was quite possible. Ah, it is you again. You had best have remembered my previous warning, hatchling. Naturally, I've prepared your lordships there, and in greater quantity than requested. The snake looked upward and opened his mouth, letting out a hissing chortle. Excellent. Manda is peckish this morning. This unexpected delivery pleases me greatly. The gathered here and ready to be inspected as you like. Manda shirred onto dry land and towered over his hapless tribute. Gator's thugs were prostrated on the ground and shivering, and several had urinated onto themselves in terror. The serpent tilted its head about, side to side as though appraising his next meal. Manda's mouth curled back in minor disgust as he stared at them. Such sorry specimens these are. I will expect much better next time, servant. Naruto bit down a scowl and nasty retort, not at all liking this creature's tone. The QB was outright cursing Manda inside the blonde's mind, howling about how the impetuous snake boss would end up becoming the demon's supper as soon as Yondaim's seal was dissolved. Now that was a battle that Naruto would pay a heavy sum to be allowed to see. Mostly because the kitsune would devour the snake with ease. Again, my apologies. I should have been more discriminating. Indeed, but I will accept this unworthy offering today. Our contract is now complete. Your lordship is too kind and magnanimous, my most sincere thanks. Naruto hoped that the old snake couldn't detect how much his tone actually lacked sincerity. Regardless, the serpent ignored the demon carrier as he dove into his human meal with sickening gusto. The blonde released his king intent, wanting to hear the thugs scream and cry as the snake consumed them. Some tried to scramble away, but Manda's legendary speed was not to be overcome. Naruto strode onto Gator's corpse as the snake ate, using the criminal magnate headless husk as a pedestal. Somehow it seemed appropriate, as he dropped his Zanbatsu to the ground and placed his hands on his waist and laughed uproariously. There was something intoxicating in the power that this gave him, causing such widespread death with a mere hand seal sequence and a little cut. Colloquial cuisine, but it sated my hunger nonetheless. You are now the second person who is permitted to call upon Manda's protection in battle. But remember that I always require such tribute, and will not accept such base churls as these next time. Now remove your coat and receive my mark, hatchling. Naruto did as commanded, despite the demon's warning, and Manda lowered his enormous head to the demon carrier's chest. The serpent lord's tongue darted out and touched the blonde's sternum, and a distinctive mark appeared. A summoner's tattoo. Now he could call the larger snakes without needing to use the actual contract as a medium. Team 10 watched on in both terror and amazement. It is done. Now I shall return to my sleep, and I would suggest not to bother me again. Manda turned about to stare at Tazuna, and the others won the bridge. The snake bared his S-maw and snapped at them with a violent hiss, letting out his hissing chuckle as they leapt back in unison, the old bridge builder losing his balance and taking a spill onto the hard concrete. The serpent then disappeared back to wherever he always returned. The bridge's structure seemed a bit worn where Manda had constricted around it. Well, that was rather interesting. Overall a most productive day, I'd like to think. Naruto sneered and kicked Gator's corpse into the water. The ground nearby was saturated with blood and venomous saliva where Manda had taken his meal. The blonde trudged over to the water's edge and dipped the Zanbatsu in, meticulously cleaning the crimson stain and drying the blade and reattaching Zabuza's trademark to his back. Okay, Tsunami-san and Inari are all right. I've driven out the ones in town. Nothing else here either, Asuma-sensei. Naruto here was kind enough to ensure that. Naruto scowled at Shikamaru and palmed his katana's handle. Such gross ingratitude. He'd be happy to snip that ridiculous ponytail, and then take the little punk's scalp right along with it. He'd done his share in the battle. Gator's men would have overwhelmed and killed the others had the demon carrier not lent his assistance. He wouldn't bother the next time they needed help. Maybe he'll let the snake eat you next time too, Nara. I'm sure nobody would miss you. Except your mother, and she's AB. That'll be enough out of you both. Naruto, you went beyond overboard here. Show a little damned restraint, we're not barbarians. Naruto rolled his eyes in response. Whatever, go right on ahead and take that slacker's side. Gator's S at my hand and there will be no other threats here. With permission, I'm going on alone back to Konoha. My work's done here and I don't care to lounge about with you saps. I've got things to do back home. Asuma shook his head and stared at the insubordinate demon container. Do whatever you want. Rest assured, I will be reporting this little incident to the Hokage. An baseless threat. The Hokage knew exactly what Naruto did to people like these and had never once reprimanded him about it. This mission hadn't even been assigned to him other than what Anko had said back in Sakai. She didn't have the clearance to send the Sandaime Shinobi on another mission without his approval, and so the blonde had never been outright obligated to do anything that Team 10's leader commanded. Naruto could get in trouble only through somehow compromising their mission, and he never had done anything even remotely like that. Asuma would accomplish little other than looking like an idiot in being a tattletale. Report away, Teiko. Trust me, you'll be shocked and appalled with how little Hokage-sama will care. Naruto waved over his shoulder as he walked away into Fire Country. He had his own report to make to Sandaime, involving Uchiha Itachi's warning about an incoming invasion. He hoped that this would mark the last time he would have to play tag along with somebody else's squad. The entire experience made him appreciate his own team and instructors that much more. Maybe he would devote more time to making things work with them when he got back, at least until he earned a promotion through the Chunin exams. That also meant attending some training sessions with them as well. And so the demon container departed and broke into a run, having no idea that the news he was about to deliver would soon change everything in his existence. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.